It's football and other F words. My name is Zach Lyons. You can follow me on X at F Words Pod. He's Mike Herndon. You can follow him on X at Mike Herndon NFL. Both stackinginbox.com and paulkarski.com have combine mania going on. Of course, PK is up there at the combine, and of course, with 440 Sports, he's doing some podcasts with there. And of course, we have Easton Freeze and JT Runke or Runke, it's the worst last name in America, is also up there at the combine.
I don't know. What was the guy's name? Kaniga from West Virginia? Yeah, that might be worse.
Maybe. I don't know if you're coming through your microphone now. So I don't know if something's happened, but you may need to move it closer to you or something. But that's Mike Herndon. Like I said, he's got some combine stuff up at paulkarski.com. We have videos between me and Stoney, and on Thursday we have we separate it into two parts, but we have over 2 hours of me and Stoney watching Travis Glover film. But not just talking about Travis Glover, okay? It's not just, we were talking about Travis Glover, but we were talking about his process, what he sees, and it's kind of like those old I'm an Idiot videos where we're explaining, like, I'm asking him questions that the normal person would be asking him. And speaking of that, we're going to be having stuff over at stackinginbox.com. I believe next week is when I'm going to plan it, but it's going to be webinars for free agency where you guys can come and watch in real time me configure contracts, talk about certain things, and ask questions at the very end. And we'll be able to, I'm going to teach, not just talk to or talk at. I'm going to teach. We'll see how that goes.
Okay.
But that'll be for everybody that are paid subscribers over at stackinginbox.com. Our sponsors, bluegrassbeverages.com. Go over there to get whatever you may need to prepare for the NFL draft. If you want to have your own drafts at the draft, go over to Bluegrass Beverages and get your beer over there. That's the way to do it. The Combine is coming up, the Underwear Olympics. I am sitting down all weekend to watch a bunch of guys just run laps around the field, it feels like, all day long is what I'm going to be doing. At least someone from the Titans is doing that because everybody else is leaving to go to a stupid and poorly scheduled groundbreaking ceremony, but we'll talk about that later because it's not that big of a deal. But go to Bluegrass Beverages and get your beer, get your liquor, get your wine. Over 50 years in business, Bluegrass Beverages. Speaking of wine, the NFLPA came out with their players report cards. So the players, of course, graded the Tennessee Titans players. And I ask you, Mike, did the sour grapes age like wine as the treated families so poorly they got a D+? And someone had mentioned that on the radio that you said is just full of sour grapes all around it. But it sounds like to me it aged like wine. And that is a double usage tied back into Bluegrass Beverages. That's a pretty good connection, by the way.
It was expertly done. I still think Wesley Woodyard is sour grapes. Sorry, I just am.
So even though there's factual proof,
no, I'm saying there's some truth to what he said. Like there's zero doubt about it. But I just think him going on the radio and whining about Vrabel, I have a hard time because that's the second time
he's asked about it, though. So they asked him specifically about it.
Right, but I'm just saying, that's the second time he's done that or brought up these things about the Dean Pease thing.
Maybe you have more of an issue with the people interviewing him because they're the ones who are putting him in that position to speak honestly.
It's not that. I just think I think he's gone on there twice. He's whined about Vrabel. He clearly isn't a huge fan of the guy personally, and I think that probably comes down to the fact that he got benched and then cut under Vrabel. When basically as soon as Vrabel arrived, he moved to Jayon Brown, kind of more as that weak side linebacker that Woodyard had been previously. So I don't know. I still think there's sour grapes in there, even if there are some truth. There is some truth in there too. And I've always said that there was likely some truth included in the whole thing about kids not being allowed in the facility. And now we know, that he's making the play.
At least they're not charging for daycare like the Chargers.
Well, yeah. And a lot of people.
That's why Phillip Rivers had to leave. He was going to have to file bankruptcy for all those charges for daycare.
Exactly. And I'm it's one of those things where everyone, you see the report for your team and you're like, oh my God, my team's so cheap. I guarantee you could go through almost every other team's report and be like, oh my God,
the Commanders, there's sewage. spewing out into the locker room. So people's shit is coming into the locker room.
Yeah. The
So let's run through
like,
a couple of these things.
The Chiefs.
I just wanted to really use my sour grapes aged like wine line on that. But okay, so first is the club's accommodations, and as players are designated to sit in the back of the plane, where many players don't fit in the seats while the staff sits in first class. Now let's talk about this because I've been on the team plane twice, one in the Munch era and one in the Wiz era, and both times the staffers or maybe lower level staffers and visitors that are coming, they sit in the back of the plane, and they also just throw luggage. They don't put luggage in. They used to not put luggage in the cargo hold. They just throw them in the back of a couple seats and a couple of rows in the seats. And all the players set up in the front, coming all the way back. So I guess depending on seniorities where you got to sit. So this is something under the John Robinson or Vrabel era that got installed or maybe Malarkey. I forget that Malarkey's in there. Or did we go to Miami in the Malarkey era?
It was pretty short.
Still, I think in that time. But maybe it was installed in the Malarkey era. But that's something that's relatively new, and that's something that is just insane to me from being on the team plane that I just don't envision any team playing to where you would want them to sit in the back. But that's just it explains a lot about their troubles on the road recently. That they're having to also have roommates, and I don't think that was the case. In the few times I've been around players like that, both those things are relatively new. How new, I don't know, but those things are relatively new.
And I would venture a guess that both those things are Vrabel things, not Amy Adams Strunk things. I don't believe that Amy Adams Strunk was probably going to the travel staff and saying, we got to save on some of these Marriott expenses. Our bill's just too high at the end of the year. We're going to need to get like some of the players to room up together on the road. Like, I just don't buy that was an Amy Adams Strunk directive. I think that was likely a Vrabel directive. And it was probably more of a, hey, we're going to put the rookies together on the road with a young or with like another veteran or something, or like a younger veteran or something like that, to try to like maybe have them be extra accountable, so they're not like out at 2 a.m. or breaking curfew or whatever. Just trying to minimize headaches with some of the young guys who haven't, been on the road to Houston before on a Saturday night. And,
Houston is just a mecca of entertainment.
Oh, ask James Harden about that. There are things to do in Houston that young men can find very interesting. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Strip clubs. Just say what you're saying. Strip clubs. Listen, they are one of 12 teams that do not provide a family room during games. And apparently they do not allow children or family members to come into the locker room, which we heard from Wesley Woodyard. 89% of the players do feel like the locker room is big enough, which is still 17th overall. So it's like there's probably like how big or, and variations. I don't know how the survey is actually read or presented. If it's like somewhat satisfied, not at all satisfied, big enough, somewhat big, whatever. 87% of the players feel like they have enough room in their individual lockers. Only 67% of the players feel like they have enough hot tub space. 26 overall. So a bunch of these guys are just, sharing hot tubs, apparently. Only 78% of players feel like they have enough cold tub space. 24th overall. The players feel that the training staff moderately contributes to their success. 24th overall, which I think is interesting because you flip it over to the strength coaches. The players feel that the strength coaches significantly contribute to their success. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Frank Piriano the guy that was the head strength and conditioning coach, and he is out of there, that they feel that he was, pretty significantly contributed to their success. So that's very, very interesting. Any thoughts on any of those things that I just went through?
Not really. I mean, I ultimately think like they've upgraded a lot of things at St. Thomas Sports Park, and I'd be interested to know whether they're referring specifically to the locker room at St. Thomas Sports Park or the locker room at the stadium or both. I guess would be something I'd really kind of like to see clarification on. Maybe they have more detail in the actual reports that are provided to the team, but I would say that would be interesting if they had an issue with the size or quality of the locker room at St. Thomas Sports Park, because that's almost brand new. I mean, that's like 3 or 4 years old. Whereas I'm not surprised if Nissan Stadium's locker rooms are kind of a dump, like the whole stadium is kind of a dump. Like it's very average to below average as far as NFL facilities go, but we know that's not going to last long. So,
and a new part of the survey, Mike Vrabel, head coach, Amy Adams Strunk, owner, were surveyed. The players feel that Mike Vrabel was somewhat willing to listen to their locker room, 19th overall. He was the 22nd highest rated NFL head coach. I'm a little surprised by that rating, but it's also like everybody's like, well, it's a B+, but it's also like, is he the bottom part of the 80? Was it like, I guess when we were growing up, is 86 or 87 was the lower end of B+. But either way, all the love that was being told about and shown about Mike Vrabel, and he did get some high remarks in being a clear communicator, but the players feel that Mike Vrabel was only just somewhat willing to listen to the locker room, which I thought was somewhat willing. I thought was very interesting.
And I wonder
to what we've heard.
And I wonder what that split is, though, right? Because I bet if you're Derrick Henry, if you're Jeffrey Simmons, he probably feels like he's very willing to listen to you. If you're Teair Tart or like some of these other guys, Monty Rice, he's probably not super willing to listen to what those guys have to say. So I do think that there's probably a split in that, maybe that kind of, because for all of the things I do think Vrabel does well, I 100% understand that he is not a personality that is going to fit for everybody, because he's extremely strong personality. He is going to take the piss out of you, and that's like his way of showing affection. He's got like that old school kind of mentality, which some people love and some people just do not take to at all. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that there's split opinions on Vrabel.
But club owner Amy Adams Strunk receives a rating of 8.7 out of 10 from Titans players when considering her willingness to invest in the facility. So 15th overall. So there goes back to your original point about how the changes are coming. They just have not arrived fully fleshed out yet. So for those that want to say that the owner is cheap, here you go.
Well, and I'd also say that she's probably getting dinged specifically there because they were playing on turf this year. And that's something that is universally come back in all of these NFLPA surveys, is that these players hate playing on turfs. I think they said 92% of respondents say they prefer playing on grass to turf. The Titans obviously changed Nissan Stadium from grass to turf.
Get used to it.
Yeah, and it will be the case at the new stadium too. But I think that probably factors into her score maybe being a little bit lower than what I would honestly otherwise expect it to be, because she spent money. And I do hate the narrative that like, well, Amy Adams Strunk is cheap. She's cheap. They've restructured contracts to basically spend like quote unquote over the cap each of the last 3 years. They've invested a ton of money at St. Thomas Sports Park that we just talked about. They've built out all of the staff for like the back end business of the Titans, as well as like, fan engagement and all this other stuff. They've spent a ton of money on all of those areas since she's taken over, in addition to building the new stadium. Like there's a lot of money that she's pumping in to this franchise. I just simply do not buy this idea that she's cheap.
And we've been on this train for a while now that she is not cheap and she's willing to spend money. And this will take us into comments that have been made at the Combine by both Rand Calathon. Is that what we're calling him? Calathon.
I can't do this. The benefit.
Yeah, I like it. It's a lot better than calling a grown man Callie. I'll tell you that. It's a couple letters away from calling another grown man daddy, and it is the same thing. It's a terrible nickname. Call him BC. I'm telling you. Callie is ridiculous, and hearing grown men say it makes me cringe every time. And reading it is even worse. It is such a terrible, terrible nickname.
Reading it is tough.
Yeah. But anyway, so I put out here some common off-season Titan themes after my instant reactions from the press conferences at the Combine. And I put in here thrifty. And I said, won't be spending just to spend, won't be overpaying. And Puka the Nomad now, but he's usually Puka Hair. He gets in here and he talks about where are they just not wanting to spend money because of the bonuses in escrow, or he goes, I thought the family fortunes rebounding after pandemic, and I'm like, well, for the definition of thrifty is not being cheap. It is being not wasteful with your money, being careful and calculated with how you spend your money. And I think we both know, we both just talked about, but I think everybody needs to get out of their mindset that this is a cheap organization. They're just not going to, specifically this year, if you expect them to spend 80 million of the cap, because I think their cap space will end up being over 80 million. But if you think they're only going to have like 5 million in season to play with, I think you're grossly misunderstanding how free agency works, what their approach to free agency works, all that kind of stuff. So like, I don't want to spend too much time on this particular thing because I think this is going to be something that's better served when we're closer to free agency. But I do just want to kind of say, like, guys, they're not going to go crazy and spend 80. They're not going to spend 90% of the salary cap space because they're specifically talking about in different parts of this, of the press conference about having money to operate during the season, to operate late in the summer, but also going to probably they want to be top 5 in cap space next year. Like they're planning ahead. And that's something that I feel like we haven't really had tangible evidence of that the past regimes dating all the way back to Floyd Reese were actually doing.
And I completely believe that that's the right approach too, right? Like I just don't think, and I know a lot of people will call them cheap regardless if they don't spend every single dollar that they have available to them in free agency this year. But there's, as we've already seen, the premium players are not going to make it to the market. So what you end up seeing in free agency mostly is you see teams spending top dollar at these various positions for players that are not elite players, like players that are just good, maybe not even good, maybe closer to average NFL starters. You're not getting the top of the line guys, but you still have to pay the top of the line money because look, everybody's hungry. Like if you can look at the list of free agent offensive linemen and realize that there's not a ton of tackles available, right? And then think about this, that there are a ton of teams that are sitting here going, we desperately need tackle help. So a guy like Trent Brown, a guy like Michael Onwenu, even a guy like Jonah Williams, is going to make more money than really what they probably should.
If one of those guys don't even make it, because I don't even think it sounds like to me Elliot Wolf's bringing back on Onwenu. And
that sounds like it's a priority for them.
That sounds like that's a priority for them. So, I mean, some of these guys that you're still thinking are going to make it to free agency, because remember, the Harold Landry extension got done, if I'm not mistaken, the Sunday before free agency opened up, which opens up on a Tuesday. If I recall correctly, that was the timeline. Right. So, I mean, there could be a big difference in what you think is free agency now to even up to the day before free agency when they can still get extensions done.
Exactly. And you look at corner and you're like, oh, well, L'Jarius Sneed, Jalen Johnson, those two guys are gone. Like L'Jarius Sneed's been tagged. Jalen
Johnson get tagged?
No, he's not going to be tagged. It sounds like an extension is like going to happen in the next few days. It sounds like that's already like most of it has been agreed upon. So now you're looking at like the top tier corners are like, Kendall Fuller, Chidobe Awuzie, Stephon Gilmore, guys like that are not. I mean, look, I think Kendall Fuller's a really good player, so like I'll set him aside, and I think Awuzie has some ability too. But those are good corners. They're not great corners, but you're gonna have to pay them like they're great corners to get them because everybody's gonna want them. The Titans need 2 corners really in free agency that can start for them this year.
And they're looking to add playmakers on both sides of the ball, which I feel like wide receiver got the bulk of the spotlight yesterday.
Yeah.
But there's many times where Ran Carthon said, we're looking at playmakers on both sides of the ball. And he's specifically talking about cornerbacks, which we know they desperately need, and wide receivers, which we know. So, like, people really need to start upping the importance of cornerback and put that on their radar outside of just free agency. So just a little aside there.
And I do think, getting back to the point about spending, I think they're going to spend reasonably. I don't think they're going to blow the whole, $80 million this year. And it's smart because they're not in a 1 year, we've got to go for the Super Bowl this year kind of window anymore. Like that was the way that things were in 2021, and I thought that was appropriate then because that team was close. And trying to go get a Julio Jones made sense at that point. It doesn't make sense now. Like if you look up and down this roster, like regardless of how optimistic you are about, certain guys on it, this roster is just chock full of holes right now. Like I said in my piece for Paul Kawarski last week, paulkawarski.com last week, they've got to find like 12 starters like that are not on the roster.
That's
right
being
now.
Generous, I feel like.
Like a minimum of 12 starters right now. The odds of them hitting because I mean that's going to be draft picks and free agency. The odds of them hitting on 12 guys to the point where like this is a really good roster is like zero. It's just not going to happen. They're going to miss on some guys in free agency. They're going to miss on some guys in the draft. It happens all, pretty much every year to every team. So I think we have to look at this realistically as this is not a team that's built for 2024. This is a team that's built to improve in 2024. Maybe show some signs of life, see what they've got in Will Levis, see what you've got in Tyjae Spears, that kind of thing. And then you hope that maybe by 2025, 2026, you're ready to contend again. And by that point, you've got some free agent hits that, are under contract. You've got some draft picks coming up that are, young stars, hopefully.
There's a difference between building a competitive roster and a contending roster.
Right.
You could be competitive and not contenders. And I think that's what the Titans are aiming for. And if they end up being contenders because Will Levis takes this giant Josh Allen-like leap, that's all gravy because then they could build upon that in the next year because they have the salary cap space. So do not expect to spend everything. And I tell you, a guy, speaking of free agents and stuff like that, I'm even more convicted that Derrick Henry is not coming back.
Okay.
And I think Bill Callahan took the coach-like approach, while Ran Carthon took the pretty much hard stance and basically said, he's not coming back. Here's what they said on if there's potential to bring Derrick Henry back and if there has been any further conversation. Is what Ran Carthon said. Derrick Henry and I had a good conversation on the way out, and he knows where we are, and we know where he is. Okay. I guess he's in Dallas probably. I think you guys have been around a year know that we don't really talk about players' contract status in public, but we'll be well positioned to do whatever we need to do. However, when those conversations will need to be had, we'll have them with Derrick and his team. He goes on to say on how much he has to weigh the fan aspect of Derrick Henry decision to the team development aspect. It weighs because I hear that question around town a lot, which we've already heard this story once. People will come, and the first thing they say is, hey, we're not going to lose Derrick Henry, are we? And I think I've probably, in my 12 months on the job, I've got more Derrick Henry questions than anything. So I understand that piece of it too. But this is the most important part of this whole thing. But I have a responsibility to build this team long term. And like I said, we'll cross that bridge with Derrick and his team when we get there. Callahan went on to say, yeah, I've reached out to Derrick Henry. I know Justin Otten, J.O., has reached out. See, J.O., great use of a nickname. That's why I like BC. J.O., great use of a nickname. Has reached out as well, but he's going through. He was at the Pro Bowl. I didn't want to bother him. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Super Bowl, but I think that there's a great relationship with him and the organization that I know he's always going to have. The Titans in his heart. So whatever that looks like moving forward, we'll keep working through it. But I know what he means to the city and to the team, and I'm looking forward to get to know him. This comes off the heels of Brian Callahan talking about the value of the running back and how like you need kind of a different kinds of running backs, this and that. But he basically described the Derrick Henry running back as the guy that you just need to get, 2 yards. So you don't pay Derrick Henry to just get 2 yards. And so all this stuff together, it's 0% chance he's coming back. I'm even more staunch in that belief.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because I just it doesn't make sense to me from either side, and I've kind of been on this for a while now. Like, I mean, the Titans, like we said, they're not going to try to. I'll say the one side that it makes sense from the Titans angle is just the sentimental angle, which I think even Carthon mentioned. That there's some sentimental stuff with Henry there. And the only reason to bring him back is that you don't want to see him go to play in another uniform, and you want to see him get 100 touchdowns and 10,000 yards in Nissan Stadium this fall. It's one of probably the few bright spots, if we're being honest, of what that team's probably going to produce in 2024.
I disagree. I mean, no.
I think that's
there's gonna be playmaking wide receivers are gonna be here.
I think there's gonna be moments, but I don't think they're gonna have like a huge amount of success. So I'm saying, like, if you want to sell something to the fans, I think you sell the playmaking.
Listen, nobody's coming to those games with no parking anyway. So
if you draft if you draft a receiver at 7, you're gonna sell the hell out of that receiver, right? To the fan base. But one of the other things that you can sell to the fan base is, hey, come watch Derrick Henry get, his 100th NFL rushing touchdown. Come watch Derrick Henry get, break Eddie George's franchise rushing record. Those things I think you could sell. But from if you're trying to build a Super Bowl champion in 2025 or 2026 or whatever down the road here, it makes no sense to bring Derrick Henry back. He's going to do nothing but eat up money, take away carries.
Going to Dallas. Let's just call it.
He's going to Baltimore.
He's going to Dallas.
No,
he's going to Dallas, and here's why he's going to Dallas is because he lives in Dallas. They're going to offer him a lot of money because they're not bringing back Tony Pollard. It is Dallas.
I could see it being
I'm
Dallas.
fairly convinced now that it's like I would say it's 60% Dallas, 40% the Ravens, and 10 women. Yeah, 30% the Ravens and 10% the Chargers. I'm throwing the Chargers in there. I think the people that bring up the Buffalo Bills are wasting their fucking mental, IQ over there, mental energy on something that doesn't fucking make sense.
And I could see Jerry becoming enamored with the idea of getting.
I think he's already enamored.
After he, took Ezekiel Elliott in that draft and probably should have taken Derrick Henry, instead. So I could see him becoming enamored with that idea of like getting Derrick Henry in a Cowboys uniform and all that. So,
yeah, I mean, like we said last week, he's already said he doesn't want to be here in so many words. The Tennessee Titans in so many actions have shown that they don't want him here. And listen, Tyjae Spears, he's made of the right shit, and that's all that matters.
He's made of the right shit.
That's all.
I love that quote.
Made of the right shit. Loved it. Kept telling everybody that for ever since he got drafted. But it's glad to know that everybody has come around to my way of thinking. Really appreciate always being right. Speaking of that, I want to talk about this Treylon Burks stuff because this Treylon Burks stuff has me a little confused because they talk about they're going to be aggressive in attacking the wide receiver position, but they keep bringing up developing Treylon Burks. And I think people think they're comparing him to Ja'Marr Chase. I don't know what the point of bringing up Ja'Marr Chase was because Ja'Marr Chase was like really awesome year 1, and Treylon Burks were hoping that he's just, for the love of God, just be good in year 3. But there was a comment that I want to get your thoughts on throughout all this. So we could talk a little bit about Treylon Burks. I don't think he's really worth a lot of time about when you're talking about the wide receiver position for the Tennessee Titans. But here's this quote from Ramon Foster. Now, this is just the quote that the Ramon Kalen Will show put up on Twitter. So if there's more to the quote, I will be honest. I did not listen to it this morning. I just saw the tweet. So if you have a complaint about the context that we're about to discuss this, please, whoever their social media manager is, just email them. Okay. Treylon Burks hasn't had a lot of guidance from older guys in the Titans wide receiver room. That room has been full of guys trying to prove themselves. So Robert Woods didn't exist. Chris Moore and DeAndre Hopkins don't exist either. Like, where is this idea that there hasn't been at least somewhat of a veteran presence in that room? Because that's also discounting Chris Conley was there at some point, through all that. I get that they're not like great veterans, but they're at least veterans that can do something.
I think Woods and Hopkins are all you need. I mean, like both those guys have been super, successful at points in their careers, and are generally considered to be like good locker room guys, right? I mean, I think Hopkins has gotten rave reviews for his presence in the Titans locker room during his time here. So I don't know where the idea that Burks just hasn't had enough, mentorship comes in. Burks just hasn't been healthy for one, and hasn't been productive too. I mean, he just hasn't done it. They have to try to make stuff work with Treylon Burks because look, he's under contract. You can't cut him. You can't
have to.
Well, unless you can find
a luxury that they do.
Unless you can try to find a trade partner that you can dump him on for a day 3.
I mean, it sounds like to me that they're doing what I have begged them not to do, or they're doing what I begged them to do, and that is go into this offseason with any hope that Treylon Burks is a big part of their plans in the future. Now, if he turns into something that's different, you're playing with house money. But neither of these guys drafted Treylon Burks. They were not in the room to trade away A.J. Brown. And it sounds like to me they're looking to attack either in this draft and on top of free agency, bringing in 2 to 3 wide receivers on top of DeAndre Hopkins. And that is the way they should go about it. And that's what I've been trying to explain on various different shows and articles and tweets, is that like it's house money. It's like Malik Willis, right? Like when they drafted Malik Willis, is like if he's a bust, he's a bust. It doesn't really matter. They're playing with house money. Treylon Burks, at this point, we just have to forget that he was a first-round pick because the GM and the head coach who were there involved in that process are no longer here. These guys are not invested in him. If he takes the training, because right now, Rand Carthon did say something that piqued my interest, is like, oh, he's training with DeAndre Hopkins and other veterans, learning to be what it is to be a pro, which I guess the coaches didn't coach him to do any of that. I don't know. Yeah. But either way,
I think it's great that he's doing it, but
you can't. I think there's going to be 2 or 3 wide receivers that are brought in with the expectation that they're going to be ahead of Treylon Burks and Kyle Phillips and whoever else may be on the back end of the roster, Kearis Jackson or Trayshawn Harrison or whatever. I think they're pushing these guys out in the wide receiver room because they know that they can't be depended upon, and that is the proper way to build a roster.
I completely agree with that. I think, and it's just like the Caleb Farley situation too, right? Like, I mean, Caleb Farley, he is on the roster. No, you are not counting on anything from him. Like, right. You pretend like he's not there. And if he maybe turns into something that's super, great, but you pretend like he's not even there. I don't think Burks may be quite that extreme, but you almost have to treat it the same way because he's shown you nothing that he can be a top 3 wide receiver on a good offense and be productive and stay on the field.
They're putting the onus on him, right? Like, this is what it sounds like to me. The onus, if you guys want Treylon Burks to be a first-round draft pick wide receiver that is something, he's going to have to do it. We're done holding his hand. And that's what it kind of sounds like to me.
And I also think, and I think they would admit this too, they have to get faster at wide receiver. Like, they just do. And look, 40 times aren't everything, as we'll talk about here momentarily, I'm sure. But if you look at the 40 times for everyone who caught a pass from Will Levis or Ryan Tannehill last year, do you know who the fastest 40 time was that caught a pass from Will Levis or Ryan Tannehill in 2023.
Ooh, and just wide receivers?
Pass catchers. Anybody who caught a pass.
Chig would probably be the fastest.
Chig at 4.52.
Yeah.
Fastest one. Everyone else 4.55 or above, which is
was Tyjae Spears. Was he 4.55 or above, or are you not counting them?
Yeah, he was 4.55. So gotcha. It's just not a fast bunch, right? Like we know that, and I know, like, hey, I've talked about Treylon Burks. He has some build up speed. Like when he gets to top speed, he can really go, but like he doesn't have the acceleration and what we'll talk about, as well soon. The 10-yard split, things like that. Like they need some guys that can get off the ball and be gone, right? Like they need that kind of sudden speed.
Because this question kind of got thrown out there by I'm gonna butcher his name, and I don't think I can find his name real quick, but B Will FTV TTV or something like that. But he talked about maybe that they were misusing Burks by not, putting him in the slot more. Burks played a lot in the slot. Could he be a big slot like Boyd? And I think this is a good comparison to make in the sense that maybe his career, the best shot at his career taking off is being a Boyd-like wide receiver, being salvaged, I guess would be a better way. But being a Boyd-like wide receiver, this team does like big slots. I mean, is there a path that maybe that is the most clear and obvious path to redemption for Treylon Burks is for them to convert him into a big slot receiver?
Yeah, I think there's some valid point to be made there. That's what he did at Arkansas. To a large degree, I think over 80% of his snaps were in the slot at Arkansas. But I don't know. I mean, I still think at the end of the day, part of Treylon Burks' problem is just confidence. Like he ball hits him in the face mask and he drops it, or Will Levis drops a dime into his arms, on a deep ball, and it just goes right to the ground. Like being in the slot isn't going to fix that. So I think a lot of it is between his ears, really. But if they want to try him in the slot a little bit more, I think part of the problem runs into that. Like I think DeAndre Hopkins kind of falls into that role too. That like he might be better at the slot at this point in his career too. I think he can play outside, but if you're asking me what he would be an ideal situation, I think maybe getting him in the slot would make him the most productive version of himself. So you can't have like your whole team made out of guys that really like need to be in the slot. You got to have some guys that can win on the outside, which is ultimately Callahan's priority, and I think what they're going to attack aggressively in the draft and free agency.
Okay, so earlier we talked about that we're both pretty convinced that 0% chance Derrick Henry's back based on the words and the actions of other people,
right,
and the decision makers. So I don't know if you saw my social post last night.
Maybe
but I'm a little concerned that Andre Dillard's going to still be on this team.
I did see that.
And here's why. If he expects Andre Dillard to be one of the guys to get an opportunity to work with Bill Callahan, well, again, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Just staying consistent about keeping family business in house. I think it's documented. Dre didn't play as well as he probably would have wanted or the way we wanted. But nonetheless, he's still a talented guy that has some physical traits that you just can't find. Now, here's where I'm at on this. I think that they're in the midst of discussing him taking a pay cut or restructuring his contract in some way for him to have the chance that a contract that reflects him having the chance to earn a starting job. Because if you wait a couple of days after free agency begins, he gets $3 million guaranteed.
Right.
Okay. And that then affects your post-June cut designations because that $3 million is not considered, from what I can tell, is not calculated in Spotrax or over the caps post-June cap cut. Because that's guaranteed. So that would be dead money. That's not being accounted for yet.
Yeah, because technically they could cut him with a post-June 1 designation right now, and that would not be guaranteed. Yeah.
So I pair that with everything they've talked about Bill Callahan being able to take guys with physical traits. He's a first-round talent. Okay. Now, we know, and because I think there's a difference between Jeff Stoutland got the best out of Andre Dillard, and it was pretty good when he was in Philadelphia. But the problem is that someone came along that was better while he was injured, and he couldn't come back and reclaim that. And he was also cheaper. So they tried to do the smart thing and say, hey, we have this piece. Let's try to trade him. Couldn't trade him. Okay, he'll just hit free agency then. Bill Callahan is probably the only guy that could probably do something with Andre Dillard like Jeff Stoutland.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they're keeping him on to be a starter, but his cap hits have already been factored into all the salary cap numbers you see. I wouldn't be surprised if Bill Callahan came in and said, okay, I need to interview him. I need to talk to him, which is what he's doing this week, right? Yeah. None of the position coaches came to the combine. They're handling their business over at the facilities. I wonder if there is an avenue where, A, they just let the contract ride because Bill Callahan believes in them, but it may not. Maybe they're just willing to pay that much for depth because they're already paying it and they already got the cap space to do other stuff, or if they're restructuring it. But I'm like at 15% chance on all that stuff. Like, I still think 85% chance this guy's not on the roster. But the comments yesterday did not make me more cemented in my feeling about Andre Dillard.
Yeah, I'm with you. I that did raise my eyebrow a little bit when.
Oh
when
man, I was hoping you'd say no. You're an idiot, really Zach. You're overreacting.
But I mean, look, as bad as Andre Dillard was, I mean, we're talking about $3 million, I think, in cap savings if they cut him, just like a straight cut, not a post-June 1. I think if you do post-June 1, it's like 6 or 7. They don't need the money necessarily. Now, you could argue that, like, okay, he's not valuable. He's not as valuable as $3 million is, and I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I do think that there's a non-zero chance because I think there's also this angle, right? The roster bonus thing does come into effect, but otherwise you could take him into camp, see if he can get anywhere with Bill Callahan working with him. And if he's at the end of camp and you want to cut him, you can still cut him and save money, right? Like, I mean, you can still do that later if you don't want him taking up the roster.
Yeah, you can still get $3 million over the summer pretty easy, right? I mean, that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, so it's like, do you need the $3 million right now, or is it worth deferring the $3 million to wait and see if he can do anything with him? Because I do agree, like Andre Dillard, just as a professional athlete, is a really good athlete. I mean, he's super athletic. We saw it at times last year, you know, when he'd get out in space on some of those blocks and things like that. And you can see the athleticism and you're like, okay, yeah, there is something there with that stuff. I think he was a mess last season in pass protection, obviously. And that's a technique thing. Very
few people weren't a mess at pass protection.
Well, that's true. But yeah, he was particularly bad.
It was very, very, very bad.
And but the bigger thing to me with Andre Dillard, more so than just the technique, which I do think Bill Callahan, look, that's what he's here to do. He's here to help teach the technique and improve it and all that stuff. And I think that's largely something that can be improved for NFL offensive linemen. But the problem with me with Dillard is that I just don't think he's got any dog in him, like none. Like I think he is soft. I think he is not. He does not have the mentality to play left tackle in the NFL, and I just think that that's something that Bill Callahan's not going to be able to do it to like instill in him at 28 years old. I just don't think that's going to happen. So I still hope they move on from him, but yeah, I'm a little concerned that maybe they won't.
Yeah, I think it's a weirdly real possibility, but I do think that it's like got a summer deadline. I think it's got like, okay, well, we could cut him before camp, and okay, we've seen enough or something like that. Because it really just depends. What can Bill Callahan get whatever Stoutland got out of him? Yes, But can Andre Dillard do whatever he was doing up in Philadelphia is the bigger question in my mind. And you don't really know what that is until you get further in. And really, I mean, your left tackle options that the Cincinnati Bengals have rolled with, they've all been not as bad as Dillard, but they've all been in situations where they have allowed as much pressures as Dillard, and they're less athletic, right? I mean, Jonah Williams is less athletic than Andre Dillard, so I don't know. At the end of the day, more offensive linemen that have NFL experience, the better. And he's a guy that you kind of just, I feel like he's just a guy they're going to keep around for, and maybe just at the max, maybe he does play this year. But at the very least, they keep him around as a camp body, and then they'll get rid of him, at some point. This whole, I think my issue with Brian Callahan, Rand Carthon, and Chad Brinker leaving the combine early is that why did the Tennessee Titans decision makers that are in charge of this, which I would assume would be Chad Brinker, Burke Nihill, and Amy Adams Strunk, why would they schedule this up on February 29th during the combine? That's my biggest issue. I don't care that they're not there, but my biggest issue is that what the fuck? Like, well, that is just stupid decision making.
It's incredibly dumb. Could they not have, like, what is the pressing issue that they could have not have done it last week or next week, right? Like, it had to be done the week of the combine, right in the middle of the combine. Like, I really, honest to God, I feel like the organization owes us an explanation as to why this had to be done in the middle of the combine, because otherwise, like, why they're gonna be Monday in or Tuesday.
Yeah, what? Why on Thursday?
Or before he has to leave to go to the comp, like whatever,
And aren't we a society that is done with groundbreaking ceremonies?
Yes.
Like who is this groundbreaking ceremony benefiting other than getting some pictures holding a shovel, which you could just do at any point in time?
Okay, but I will say this. I know somebody that's working on the stadium project personally. It's a really cool thing for them, right? For the people that are working on the project, and to be able to get that picture taken and have that like as a personal
you could just do it any time. They're going to be there working on the project. I mean, it's not like they're going anywhere.
Yeah, I get it. I get that. But I don't know. It's one of those things that like
my thing is just the scheduling of it. It's just silly. Now the aspect of like, oh, you got to be in the room with the person and whatever. I mean, like Mike Vrabel and John Robinson were in the room with Isaiah Wilson. Said that was one of the reasons they drafted him was because, oh man, that in-person meeting was so great. In-person meetings can tell you something, but they can also tell you a whole lot of nothing, because the players are now trained by agents to lie. They are trained liars. It's really hard. You have to be really good to suss it out. And here's the thing.
And Anthony Robinson's still going
to be there.
Yeah. And he's the head.
So like they're going to be on a Zoom. Anthony Robinson, for those who are the body language police, like, oh, you could tell a lot more by, looking at someone's eyes. It's not like these fucking guys are going to be blindfolded, by the way.
He can get a good firm handshake, gauge out there and report back to Rand on the firmness of each offensive lineman's handshake.
But Anthony Robinson, who is at the Senior Bowl, is here at the Combine, and he is the director of college scouting and college personnel and all that kind of stuff. He's the guy that needs to be there anyway, and you can get what you need done over virtual in these 20-minute interviews, and there's 48 of them. Pick whichever 48 players you want to throw darts at and go look at, and then you got your 30-day pro days that you're going to spend more time with people. You got your local days where you can maneuver stuff around and break those rules like that, because there's a lot of players that I think if you're born here, you count as a local, if I'm not mistaken. You need to go back and look at that.
Yeah.
If you were born here or went to high school here, I think that actually counts as locals. There's a lot of people in this draft class that are from Tennessee right now. But I'll have to go back and look at that. Don't quote me on that. But I think the overarching theme of it all, I don't agree that's a big nothing burger. I think it's another baffling decision. It's like when they made the big deal about the big announcement and blah, 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 blah. And it was just like the Nissan naming rights, which everybody knew about a couple of, we got to work on this.
Well, I think the scheduling is baffling, but I do think that there's like, I don't know. I feel like it's interesting that he skips the Senior Bowl, which is a big event. And then he skips the combine too. Like, because I kind of thought, well, he's not going to the Senior Bowl because he's going to see these guys in a few weeks at the combine, and he can talk to them then, anyways, and do the round robin thing and get all the like little 15-minute interview sessions like they do at the Senior Bowl, anyways. He can do that at the combine. What's the point of doing it twice in a span of 2 weeks, right? But for him not to be there for either event is a little odd to me. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Like it may not matter at all. And like we just said,
we'll say
Robinson's going to be there.
You know that they're also kind of not in all these trade discussions that are going to be happening.
Yeah.
Usually happens here. That's just something. It's not necessarily that he couldn't still being in on trade discussions away, but it is sure a lot easier to do it when you're there because there have been trades have been done just like because they're next door to each other.
Exactly.
Just something to put out on your radar, you T. Higgins, L'Jarius Sneed, trade conspiracy theorists.
Can we put all that shit away, by the way? Like, this team has no business trading for anyone. They should not be trading picks for any players. They should be trying to offload players for picks, like Treylon Burks, like Malik Willis, like guys that they have no use for anymore. They should be trying to offload them for more picks. They should not be trading any picks for players because that is not the point in the build that they are at. They are in the ground level of rebuilding this thing from the ashes right now. And this is not the time to go send out more draft picks, which is their biggest problem, is that they don't have any young stars on the roster right now, besides possibly these guys they drafted last year that we don't really know for sure about yet. And they need more of those guys. You don't want to send away picks for older players who are like win now guys on a shitty roster. Like, it makes zero sense. So no, the Titans should not trade for him. Insert whatever player you want.
Yeah. Here. And Deagle, they literally, I think at the combine you were still meeting people in person, and then everything else after the combine was done in Zoom. So they did actually talk to Isaiah Wilson because Vrabel tells a story about him walking into the room, the meeting room. So I mean, they loved the shit out of Isaiah Wilson's combine interview. Okay, we'll have more time to talk about this particular subject, but percentage chance. Where are you at on number 7 overall pick, where it's offensive lineman, wide receiver, other position, trade back, four options? What's your percentage chances?
I'm going to put, I think the most likely options are.
Or you can just rank them in order. Let's just do that.
Okay. I'll say one, most likely wide receiver. Second most likely trade back. Third most likely offensive line. Fourth most likely anything else.
I agree. I'm in full lockstep there. 6 teams will submit a proposal to push the NFL trade deadline back 2 weeks. Early returns or owners and GMs are split on it. Tanking is a concern, but they're talking about pushing it back from week 8 to week 10. I'm all for it. What about you?
Yeah, I'm for it. I think, I mean, teams aren't going to tank in the NFL. It's just not a thing that can really happen. I mean, if the team's not going to trade away their starting quarterback and like their entire offensive line, or anything like that. I mean, you might get a couple more trades. It's a good thing to get more trades, I think.
Yeah. Okay. There was one other thing. Oh, I want to talk about your, let me pull up your article here. I got it right here. Okay. I want to talk about just some of the names that you have on, because I want to give away everything. But wide receiver, tell the people, I'm a 10-yard split guy and a shuttle guy, vertical and broad.
Yeah.
I'm everything but the actual 40-yard dash, bench press, and 20-yard split. I think the 10-yard split's more important than the 20-yard split. Where are you at? What is the 2 things that people need to be looking at coming from the combine?
So I think it varies by position.
For wide receiver.
For wide receiver, I would say 10-yard split to me is the biggest thing. And then, I would go probably vertical jump after that. PFF did a really good study, which I linked in my piece, that actually ran like regression analysis on the different combine measurables versus their WAR data, wins above replacement player. And they came up with the most correlated for receivers being hand size, which I thought was interesting.
Makes sense.
Makes a little bit of sense. 10-yard split, arm length, and vertical jump. So those are statistically the most correlated. And 40-yard dash doesn't really matter. Now, in a 40-yard dash, I think people talk about it mostly because that's the number that most people know, like what's a good 40 time. I think all these other drills, the people are less familiar with what good times actually are, so they just don't get discussed as much. Because if you say someone ran a 4.24 40, everyone knows what that means. That guy's fast as shit, versus like if I say, oh man, that guy had a 1.55 10-yard split. Nobody really knows, like, is that good? Is that bad? Is that the average? Which, by the way, it's like average. It's just harder. It's a harder thing to like wrap your mind around instantly. So, but I will say 40 time completely overblown, even though it'll be the most discussed thing all week for every position group. But just know that it really does not correlate to wide receiver success in any meaningful way.
Troy Franklin, Malachi Corley, Ryan Flournoy, guys that we have all talked about in various podcasts and tweets and stuff. But a guy that his name keeps popping up, who doesn't have the production that you're looking for, but he has the size and the athleticism, and he's a day 3 pick. Where on day 3, I think the combine will determine. But Bub Means, wide receiver out of Pitt. Where are you at on taking he's got a better career than Racey McMath, but a guy that is big, tall, and athletic who doesn't have production? Like, is that the best use of a draft pick? Is it okay if it's in the 7th round? And then is everybody just going to expect, him to be, wide receiver 1 next year because that's how Tennessee Titans fans are? I mean, like, where are your thoughts on a prospect like Bub Means?
Yeah, I think he's definitely a day 3 guy for me. Like, the production isn't big. Now, I do think there's a reason for him with having lower production. He started his career as a defensive back for Tennessee, which was originally where he started. And then I think he went to Louisiana Tech, converted to wide receiver, and then ended up in Pitt. Where Pitt, I think he had like 700 yards and like 4 or 5 touchdowns last year. So it wasn't like terrible production, but also not like, oh, wow, obviously elite, focal point of the offense kind of guy. So I think he's worth a flyer. Although, if I'm being honest, I'm trying to remember the last guy that was like a big size, speed freak dude that didn't have college production who panned out as a wide receiver at the pro level. And I can't put a finger on a guy that fits that profile. I feel like pretty much every receiver that hits at the NFL level produced in college. So I don't mind him as like a dart throw kind of guy in the late rounds, but I'm not super high on him being like a immediate contributor or even like a long-term success.
I was very surprised to see PFF study. I'm not surprised that it had bench press 40 time and vertical jump, because obviously arm size, being that their arm size is typically longer than most positions, that it's a big distance, right? You got your wingspan in your arms. It's a big distance going up and down and keeping that on there. And of course the pounds, and it shows your strength, being able to push back on a player.
Yeah.
But the 40 time vertical jump, not too surprised, but I am surprised that the 20-yard shuttle did not make it into the top 3. Little surprised by that, because Josh Norris is a big proponent and has data that backs up that it is a pretty important thing. Now, I don't know where it was on the length, but I was very on the list, but I was very surprised that it didn't make top 3.
It was actually, believe it or not, it was actually negatively correlated. The short shuttle was.
Well, you have the Josh Norris here, 20-yard shuttle right here. I just scrolled down.
Yeah, on the for interior offensive linemen. Yeah, his list deal there.
Is it only interior offensive linemen?
Yeah, it is for specifically interior offensive linemen on that specific list, where he has gone back, and I think this was a tweet from last year, so this doesn't have.
No, he had Andre Dillard on there.
Oh, did he? Oh, maybe it's all offensive linemen then. Okay,
it is
so all it is.
Abraham Lucas is on there too.
Okay, So any offensive lineman, but I guess generally tribute those measurables more so to the interior guys than the tackles. Although I think it matters for both. I just think for an interior offensive lineman, if you're doing a really like quick short shuttle, I'm very interested. So he went back and did a study. I think his number was since 2010, 28 offensive linemen recording a 4.47 or quicker short shuttle. 24 were drafted. Those 24 went on to start 84% of their NFL games. And these are all over different rounds. And he's got some late round guys like Charles Leno, who has turned out to be a big time find in the 7th round, who was one of these guys off of this list. He kind of calls it like a money ball kind of approach for offensive line play anyway. So I think there's some interesting things like that are well worth keeping an eye on this weekend as we start to get combine data out. But yeah, and I think RAS matters at like certain positions. Like I think RAS matters a lot for offensive tackles. I think it matters a lot.
I think it matters a lot for this regime and decision makers based on the information I've gathered and looked at the data. RAS is super important for cornerbacks, and that's the next thing I want to talk to you, because you have Cam Hart on here. Another guy is Max Melton for me. Quinyon Mitchell, Nate Wiggins. Those are both guys that are going to test out of this world. But RAS, vertical jump, I agree. 10-yard splits, I agree. Weight, I agree. All those things I value more than 40-yard dash, and I think all those things. The weight is weird for these positions, because when you do a standard deviation on weight and try to see how much it correlates, it doesn't really work out. But you look at it and you're like, well, you can't be too fat and you can't be too light at certain positions. Now, there are exceptions to every rule. Emmanuel Forbes would be an exception last year for the weight. Devontae Smith for the wide receiver. But for the most part, you can't be both of those things.
Yeah.
But I am with you. I am so excited to see what Cam Hart does. He was so impressive at the Senior Bowl. I really like his tape, but I am ready to see what he does athletically. I think him, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., and Max Melton are guys that Tennessee Titans fans should fall in love with. Those are like, Max Melton is probably my draft crush, but I don't think he's going to be on the Tennessee Titans. But he is a guy that his interviews and his tape and the way that he interacts on the field when nobody is watching, it's fucking amazing. I really love me some Max Melton, but I just wanted to point that out. You have edge rusher on here, and I think we've talked about edge rusher over the years because it always feels like a need. So I kind of want to just skip over it. But name some prospects that maybe you didn't name or that were on the outside looking in when you were making this list. Give me your 3 guys that you did not write about here in your piece. 3 guys.
Just for the edge rushers?
No, any position. You can go. You can go kicker if you want to.
Let me think. The linebacker, I'm blanking on his name now, from North Carolina State. Was it
Peyton Wilson?
Peyton Wilson, that's right. He's going to test like insane. I'm 100% confident of that. Inside linebacker is one of those things where like it's a massive need for the Titans currently. Although it's not a position of like huge value, and I think that the free agent class is pretty good for that group. So I think he's going to end up going too early for the Titans to really look at taking him, because unless they trade back and accumulate some extra day 2 picks or something along those lines, which entirely possible. But Peyton Wilson is one that I'm interested to see test. Braylon Allen from Wisconsin is a guy I'm interested to see test. I mean, like, huge running back. Interested to see where he's at athletically. He's not a guy I'm necessarily expecting to blow it out of the water for the combine, but I am intrigued to see where that falls. And then another one, let's see. Let me think. Because so many guys are not testing. I don't know. What's your list? Give me a few of yours while I think about it.
I'm interested to see what T'Vondre Sweat weighs, and if he doesn't weigh, I'm highly interested in his reasoning behind that. Because right now, I don't take it for what it's worth, but he is falling in mock drafts. He's like there in the 4th round. I'm like, yeah, I'll fucking take me some T'Vondre Sweat in the 4th round. Are you guys insane? But I'm very interested in seeing that whole situation scenario play out, because it's like the opposite of Bryce Young, right? Like Bryce Young didn't weigh or whatever, and everybody was like all upset, and now you got like, you know, a guy that could weigh as much as 5 Bryce Young's not weighing. It's very interesting because he didn't weigh at the Senior Bowl either. Interested to see what Troy Fautanu, his measurements, his athletic ability.
Yeah.
Greg Cosell was a big proponent of Troy Fautanu. I'm still learning his name. And also Talisa Fuaga. I'm interested to see how fast a guy that size can move. And again, for what it's worth, Greg Cosell today, I caught him on the radio on Buck's show, and he said he's a guy that I would not hesitate putting at left tackle. Just something to consider when you're thinking about trade back scenarios. Fuaga could be a guy that this team could and should fall in love with. I really like Fuaga. So just 3 guys right there. There's a lot of guys. I like the combine. I joke about that's combine, the underwear Olympics, but I do enjoy seeing like, who do I need to go back and watch tape on, or who do I need to start watching tape on, because the combine kind of helps with that for us observers. But you know, for the NFL, it doesn't mean too much. But I always like just watching.
And I did mention Fuaga in my piece. He had he measured at the Senior Bowl 33 3/8 arms, which is not great. Not necessarily disqualifying, but certainly sub-average for starting offensive tackles. So like, I think his tape is probably good enough that you still say, okay, he can probably play left tackle. But I'll say this: if he does not test well at the combine and the athleticism is just kind of and he's got short arms, then I think he's going to start to get more into the guard conversation, because some people.
I will say this: Patrick Paul stand up, by the way, as well. We started the thing. There's a bunch of people talking about Patrick Paul, and if he tests really well, because he's got the size, if he tests really well, that's a guy to keep your eye on too.
Yeah, and I'll throw another Longhorn at you, Christian Jones. Great measurables, really improved over the course of his time at Texas. He didn't start playing football until he was, I think, 17 years old. He was a soccer player growing up, believe it or not, for a guy that's now like, I think, 6'6", 330, with like 36-inch arms. I mean, the guy is or 35-inch arms. The guy's a freak. And he could test really well too. He's a good athlete, so I'll be very interested to see where he comes in, because he's going to be a guy. Him and Kingsley, is it Suamatea from BYU? Those 2 guys are guys that like I kind of have my eye on. If the Titans do not go tackle in the 1st round, I think those are day 2 kind of guys. I think Christian Jones may be more of a 3rd, 4th round kind of borderline, based on most mock drafts right now. But he's a guy that could work himself into like firm day 2 territory, I think, with a strong testing showing at the combine. So
I don't know if Braden's still watching, but he may be mad that we're running a little over. But I have a question I just have to ask, okay?
All right.
Because I thought this was interesting, because we're all about evolving mindsets, talking through new theories, new concepts, and everything. And Greg Cosell apparently is a guy that does that a lot. And I wouldn't know, because he said Derrick Henry's not an outside zone runner, which I will always lord over his head as being one of the stupidest things I've ever heard an analyst say. Yeah. But he said something I thought was very interesting, and it's a discussion I'm going to be asking a lot of people. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to ask Stoney, I'm going to ask Braden, probably a few others, about your thoughts on this, because we have talked about that right tackle is about as 90% as important as left tackle. Yeah. I think we both have agreed with that. But he said in this instance that because it is so important as right tackle at this point, because of guys like TJ Watt, he said someone else lined up over on that other side. I don't think it was Myles Garrett, but he also said someone else lined up.
Crosby lines up.
Yeah, I think it was Max Crosby. That there is the only delineation between a player who could play right tackle and a player who could play left tackle. The only delineation or difference between the 2 players is that one protects the blind side.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Because we talk all the time and we've heard some offensive linemen say how difficult it is to learn a new position because you're the mirroring of your hands and your technique and all this stuff. But is it easier for a prospect possibly to do it? Like we talked about Fuaga, who is a guy that could be he thinks could play on the left side. That's the example he was using. What are your thoughts on that mentality?
I think it depends a little bit on the player. I think some guys have an easier transition than others. But it's hard to know that going in, because everyone's going to say, yeah, no problem, I could do that when they're in an interview process, right? Nobody's going to say like, well, whoa, if you were planning on moving me, I am, except for Taylor Lewan, apparently. Taylor Lewan apparently was telling the Titans that, no, I'm a left tackle. I'm a left tackle only. I don't play on the right side. But I think some players are going to struggle. You've got so many reps in your body at that point, doing it a certain way, pushing off of this leg, using this arm to punch. And now you're having to flip all that. And it's like, it's kind of like, you right-handed for your whole life. And then someone asks you to write left-handed. It's like, well, I know how to do it, but I can't get my body to do it correctly. Right. So, it's not that extreme, obviously, as far as like fine motor detail versus, what they're doing. But I think it's not always as translatable going from left to right. But I do think his point on the value of the two positions is accurate. I think it doesn't really and that's why I'm like, look, if you think Fuaga is a better right tackle than Alt or Fashanu are left tackles.
A lot of people think Fuaga is the best one in the entire class.
Yeah.
I keep hearing it.
I do too. I have seen it all over the place now. And it's more, Fashanu almost seems like the third guy. It's almost like it's Alt, Fuaga, and then Fashanu. If you took the composite out of everybody, and that's just me kind of mentally doing that. But I do think that that's the conversation now. But if you said, all right, we could go get Fuaga, who we think is an awesome right tackle prospect, or we could take a left tackle prospect who we think is good, but maybe not as good a prospect. Just take the right tackle. The Lions did that with Penei Sewell, which they didn't. Sewell was a left tackle in college. They flipped into the right side. He's been awesome for them, but they took him knowing he was going to be a right tackle for them at number 7 overall. I believe that was number 7. And it doesn't matter. Lane Johnson has been the best offensive lineman on the Eagles for a decade, and they have always had great offensive lines. It doesn't really matter whether you have your star at right tackle or left tackle. To me, it's just that you have a star at one of them. I think a guy like Sewell, he can flip easy. We've heard a guy like Dillard say that it's very hard for him to flip to a right-handed side or a right side of the formation kind of position. So I don't know. I think it's going to vary by player on that, but positionally, don't care. Get an awesome tackle.
For what it's worth, Mel Kiper in today's mock draft that he released had J.C. Latham go to the Chargers at number 5, which would be very fantastic for the Tennessee Titans if that was the case. I think because that leaves so much for them at 7. What happens at 7 depends so much on the Chargers, and I hate it. Now, I just absolutely hate it. I
have no idea what they're going to do.
They're in a spot where it depends on them.
Yeah, and I really do think. Free agency is going to inform some of that too, because I think about Mike Onwenu, and I'm like, God, he would be perfect for Jim Harbaugh. He played for him before, right? That's a perfect fit as a free agent signing. And if you sign Onwenu, you're probably not taking a tackle in the first round. So then and look, I've already heard that the Chargers are basically planning on trading out of 5 if they can. So there's no telling if they're going to actually make that pick or move down or whatever. But it's fascinating that I do feel like the draft kind of starts at 5 right now with the Chargers, and it's going to be quarterbacks and Marvin Harrison in the first 4, and we'll see what happens after that.
Maybe more quarterbacks come off the board. We'll see after what the combine scuttlebutt is come after these quarterbacks throw.
I'm excited for rumors.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll do it for us. Enjoy the Combine. Enjoy the Underwear Olympics. Thursday, 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, a football show where we'll be diving deep even further into the Combine and comments, stuff that we did not cover here. I purposely left some comment discussions out to save it for a football show. We're going to be talking real deep into the Combine, what you can learn, what you can glean, what to ignore, all that stuff. You know what you shouldn't ignore is our sponsors over at Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Head over there, get your Combine supplies, get you some beer, some THC drinks, get you whatever you need to mellow out and enjoy some men in shorts just running around and bench pressing stuff. Just good old boy stuff. Just make sure that you do it responsibly, drink responsibly, don't drink and drive. And then just use Uber Eats. They'll deliver right to your door. They'll drive so you can drink. Don't worry about that. PaulKarski.com, StackingTheInbox.com. Subscribe to both. Follow both of us on Twitter. Turn on notifications for the show. Subscribe, rate, and review. All that stuff over at YouTube and over wherever you get your podcasts. For Mike, I'm Zach. This has been Football and Other F Words, and our shortest show for the last 5 episodes. We did it. Still over an hour, but we did it. But this has been Football and Other F Words, and you have just been effed.